Hello Year 5. I hope you've all had a lovely half term and a lovely first week back and all been enjoying the work and the challenges Miss Everett and I have set you. Miss Everett and I have been in school teaching the Year 6s who have come back, and yeah, I think they've enjoyed being there. It's been nice to do a bit of teaching in person again, but we do really miss you, so hopefully we get to see all of you again real soon. Until then, we'd like to keep you updated as much as we can. Thanks again for still sending in those emails and pictures. Not had too many recently, so please keep them up. It's so lovely to hear from you all. I thought I would carry on reading our Wrinkle in Time. So we got halfway through, what chapter were we on? Chapter 6. So they've just dropped the children off on a new planet and they've said, we need to go now, you now need to do this on your own. So Mrs. Who, Mrs. Witch, Mrs. Whatsit are just starting to disappear, and they're leaving the children with gifts to help them out on their journey. So as we know, the last lady had said, Meg, to you I leave my glasses as I'm blind as a bat. And as she spoke, there was another shimmer of spectacles, and then it was gone and the voice faded out. Okay, so let's see what else the other ladies decide to leave the children and what they find. Let's read to the end of the chapter together. So, the spectacles were in Meg's hand. She put them carefully into the breast pocket of her blazer, and the knowledge that they were there somehow made her feel a little less afraid. To all the 3 of you I give my command, Mrs. Witch said. Go down into the town, go together. Do not let them separate you, be strong. There was a flicker, and then it vanished. Meg shivered. Mrs. Whatsit must have seen the shiver, for she patted Meg on the shoulder, and then she turned to Calvin. Take care of Meg. I can take care of Meg, Charles Wallace said rather sharply. I always have. Mrs. Whatsit looked at Charles Wallace, and the creaky voice seemed somehow both to soften and to deepen at the same time. Charles Wallace, the danger here is greatest for you. Why? Because of what you are. Just exactly because of what you are. You will be by far the most vulnerable. You must stay with Meg and Calvin. You must not go off on your own. Be aware of pride and arrogance, Charles, for they may betray you. She's trying to say that even though you are very clever for your age, don't think you are too clever and do not need help. That will get you into trouble. At the tone of Mrs. Whatsit's voice, both warning and frightening, Meg shivered again, and Charles Wallace butted up against Mrs. Whatsit in the way he often did with his mother, whispering, Now I think I know what you mean about being frightened. Only a fool is not afraid, Mrs. Whatsit told him. Now go. And where she had been, there was only sky and grasses and a small rock. Come on, Meg said impatiently. Come on, let's go. She was completely unaware that her voice was trembling like an aspen leaf. She took Charles Wallace and Calvin each by the hand and started down the hill. She's very keen, isn't she, because she thinks this is where she's going to find her father. Below them the town was laid out in a harsh angular pattern. The houses in the outskirts were all exactly alike, small square boxes painted grey. Each had a small rectangular plot of lawn in front with a straight line of dull-looking flowers edging the path by the door. Meg had a feeling that if she could count the flowers, there would be exactly the same number for each house. In front of all the houses, children were playing. Some were skipping rope, some were bouncing balls. Meg felt vaguely that something was wrong with their play. It seemed exactly like children playing around any housing development at home, and yet there was something different about it. She looked at Calvin and saw that he too was puzzled. Look, Charles Wallace said suddenly, they're skipping and bouncing in rhythm. Everyone's doing it at the exact moment, which means everyone's bouncing the ball, like that. So if you were to look around, everyone's ball is bouncing or skipping. Everyone's also skipping at the same time, almost quite robotic, like they're under a spell. This was so. As the skipping rope hit the pavement, so did the ball. As the rope curved over the head of the jumping child, the child with the ball caught the ball. Down came the ropes, down came the balls. Over and over again, up, down, all in rhythm. All identical, like the houses, like the paths, like the flowers. Then the doors of all the houses opened simultaneously at the same time. And out came women like a row of paper dolls. The print of their dresses was different, but they all gave the appearance of being the same. Each woman stood on the steps of their house, each clapped, each child with the ball caught the ball, each child with the skipping rope folded the rope, each child turned and walked into the house, and the doors clicked shut behind them. How can they do that? Meg asked wonderingly. We couldn't do that way if we tried. What does it mean? Let's go back. Alvin's voice was urgent. back?" Charles Wallace asked. "Well, where?" "I don't know, anywhere. Back to the hill. Back to Mrs. What's-it, Mrs. Who, Mrs. Which. I don't like this." "But they aren't there. Do you think they'd come to us if we turned back now?" "I don't like it," Calvin said again. "Come on." Impatience made Meg squeak. "You know we can't go back. Mrs. Witch said we had to go into town." She started on down the street, and the two boys followed her. The houses, all identical, continued as far as the eye could reach. That means as far as the eye can see. Then all at once they saw the same thing and stopped to watch. In front of one of the houses stood a little boy with a ball, and he was bouncing it. But he bounced it rather badly and with no particular rhythm, sometimes dropping it and running after it with awkward furtive leaps, sometimes throwing it into the air and trying to catch it. The door of his house opened and out ran one of the mother figures. She looked wildly up and down the street and saw the children and put her hand to her mouth as though to stifle a scream, grabbed the little boy and rushed indoors with him. The ball dropped from his fingers and rolled out into the street. Charles Wallace ran after it and picked it up, holding it out for Meg and Calvin to see. It seemed like a perfectly ordinary brown rubber ball. "Let's take it into him and see what happens," Charles Wallace suggested. Meg pulled at him. "Mrs. What's-it for us to go on, said to go on into town." "Well, we are in the town, aren't we?" "The outskirts, anyhow. I want to know more about this. I have a hunch it may help us later. You go on if you don't want to come with me." "No," Calvin said firmly. "We're going to stay together. Mrs. What's-it said we weren't to let them separate us. But I'm with you on this. Let's knock and see what happens." They went up to the house. Meg, reluctant, eager to get into town. "Let's hurry," she begged. "Please, don't you want to find Father?" "Yes," Charles Wallace said, "but not blindly. How can we help him if we don't know what we're up against? And it's obvious we've been brought here to help him, not just to find him." He walked briskly up the steps and knocked on the door. They waited. Nothing happened. Then Charles Wallace saw a bell, and this he rang. He could hear the bell buzzing in the house, and the sound of it echoed down the street. After a moment, the mother figure opened the door. All up and down the street, other doors opened. But only a crack, and eyes peered towards the three children, and the woman looked fearfully out the door at them. "What do you want?" she asked. "It isn't paper time yet. We've had milk time. We've had this month's pull-a-prush person, and I've given my Decency donations regularly. All my papers are in order." "I think your little boy dropped his ball," Charles Wallace said, holding it out. The woman pushed the ball away. "Oh no, the children in our section never drop balls. They're all perfectly trained. We haven't had an aberration for 3 years. An aberration means something awful, like a big change. All up and down the block, heads nodded in agreement. Charles Wallace moved closer to the woman and looked past her into the house. Behind her in the shadows, he could see the little boy, who must have been his own age. "You can't come in," the woman said. "You haven't shown me any papers. I don't have to let you in if you don't have any papers." Charles Wallace held the ball out beyond the woman so the little boy could see it. Quick as a flash, the boy leapt forward, grabbed the ball from Charles Wallace's hand, and darted back into the shadows. The woman went very white, opened her mouth as though to say something, then slammed the door in their faces instead. All up and down the street, door slammed. "What are they afraid of?" Charles Wallace asked. "What's the matter with them?" "Don't you know?" Meg asked him. "Don't you know what all this is about, Charles?" "Not yet," Charles Wallace said. "Not even an inkling." That means not even a little bit. "And I'm trying, but I didn't get through anywhere. Not even a clink. Let's go." He stomped down the steps. After several blocks, the houses gave way to apartment buildings. At least Meg felt sure that that was what they must be. They were fairly tall, rectangular buildings, absolutely plain, each window, each entrance exactly like every other. Then coming toward them down the street was a boy about Calvin's age, riding a machine that was something like a combination of a bicycle and a motorcycle. It had the slimness and lightness of a bicycle, and yet as the foot pedals turned, they seemed to generate an unseen source of power, so that the boy could pedal very slowly, yet move along the street quite swiftly. As he reached each entrance, he thrust one hand into a bag he wore swung over his shoulder, pulled out a roll of papers, and tossed them into the entrance. It might have been Denny's or Sandy or any one of the hundreds of boys with a newspaper route in any one of the hundreds of towns back home, and yet, as with the children playing ball and jumping rope, there was something wrong about it. The rhythm of the gesture never varied. The paper flew identically and the same arc in each doorway and landed in identically the same spot. It was impossible for anyone to throw with such consistent perfection. Calvin whistled. "Whew, I wonder if they play baseball here." As the boy saw them, he slowed down in his machine and stopped. His hand arrested as if it was about to plunge into the paper bag. That means it stopped dead where it was. "What are you kids doing out on the street?" he demanded. "Only root boys are allowed out now, you know that." "No, we don't know it," Charles Wallace said. "We're strangers here. How about telling us something about this place?" You mean you've had your entrance papers processed and everything? The boy asked. You must have if you're here, he answered himself. And what are you doing here if you don't know about us? You tell me, Charles Wallace said. Are you examiners? The boy asked a little anxiously. Everybody knows our city is the best central intelligence centre on the planet. Our production levels are the highest. Our factories never close. Our machines never stop rolling. Add to this, we have 5 poets, 1 musician, 3 artists and 6 sculptors, all perfectly channelled. What are you quoting from? Charles Wallace asked. The manual, of course, the boy said. The manual was like an instruction book. We are the most orientated city on the planet. There has been no trouble of any kind for centuries. All Comatose knows our record. That's why we are the capital city of Comatose. Now, do we know what the word comatose means? Or if you're in a comatose? It kind of means you're asleep. Almost like you're in a coma. That's why Central Intelligence Agency is located here. That's why it makes its homes here. There was something about the way he said it that made a shiver run up and down Meg's spine. But Charles Wallace asked briskly, where is the Central Intelligence Centre of yours? Central, the boy corrected. Just keep going and you can't miss it. You are strangers, aren't you? What are you doing here? Are you supposed to ask questions? Charles Wallace demanded severely. The boy went white, just as the woman had. I humbly beg your pardon. I must continue my route now, or I will have to talk my timing into the explainer. And he shot us down the street on his machine. Charles Wallace stared after him. What is it? He asked Meg and Calvin. There was something funny about the way he talked, as though he weren't really doing the talking. Do you know what I mean? Calvin nodded thoughtfully. Funny is right. Funny peculiar. Not only the way he talked either. The whole thing smells. Come on, Meg pulled at them. How many times was it she'd urged them on? Let's go find Father. He'll be able to explain it all to us. They walked on. After several more blocks, they began to see people, grown-up people, not children, walking up and down across the streets. These people ignored the children entirely, seeming to be completely intent on their own business. Some of them went into the apartment buildings. Most of them were heading in the same direction as the children. As these people came to the main street from the side streets, they would swing around the corners with an odd automatic stride, as though they were so deep in their own problems and their route was so familiar they didn't have to pay any attention to where they were actually going. After a while, the apartment buildings gave way to what must have been office buildings, great stern structures with enormous entrances. Men and women with briefcases poured in and out. Charles Wallace went up to one of the women, saying politely, "Excuse me, but could you please tell me—" But she hardly glanced at him, and she continued on her way. Look, Meg pointed. Ahead of them, across the square, was the largest building they'd ever seen, higher than the Empire State Building, and almost as long as it was high. This must be it, Charles Wallace said. There's Central Intelligence, or whatever it is. Let's go on. But if Father's in some kind of trouble with this planet, Meg objected, isn't that exactly where we shouldn't go? Well, how do you propose finding him? Charles Wallace demanded. Well, I certainly wouldn't ask there. I didn't say anything about asking, but we aren't going to have the faintest idea where or how to begin to look for him until we find out something more about this place. And I have a hunch that that's the place to start. If you have a better idea, Meg, why, of course, just say so. Oh, get down off your high horse. That means stop being so bossy. Meg said crossly. Let's go into your old Central Intelligence and get it over with. I think we ought to have passports or something, Calvin suggested. This is much more than leaving America to go to Europe, and that boy and the women both seem to care so much about having things in proper order. We certainly haven't got any papers in proper order. If we needed passports or papers, Mrs. Watson would have told us, Charles Wallace said. Calvin put his hands on his hips and looked down at Charles Wallace. Now, look here, old sport. I love those 3 old girls just as much as you do, but I'm not sure they know everything. They know a lot more than we do. Granted, but you know, Mrs. Watson talked about having been a star. I wouldn't think that being a star would give her much practice in knowing about people. When she tried to be a person, she came pretty close to goofing it up. There was never nobody on land or sea like Mrs. Watson the way she got herself up. She was just having fun, Charles said. If she wanted to look like you or Meg, I'm sure she could. Calvin shook his head. I'm not so sure. And these people seem to be people, if you know what I mean. They aren't like us, I grant you that. There's something very offbeat about them, but they're lots more like ordinary people than the ones on Uriel. Do you suppose they're robots? Meg suggested. Charles Wallace shook his head. No, that boy who dropped the ball isn't any robot, and I don't think the rest are either. Let me listen for a minute. They stood very still, side by side, in the shadow of one of the big office buildings. 6 large doors kept swinging open, shut, as people went in and out, looking straight ahead, paying no attention to the children whatsoever. Charles wore his listening, probing look. They're not robots, he said suddenly, indefinitely. I'm not sure what they are, but they're not robots. I can feel minds there. I can't get to them all, but I can feel them sort of pulsing. Let me try a minute more. The three of them stood there very quietly. The doors kept opening and shutting, and the stiff people hurried in and out, walking jerkily like figures in an old silent movie. Then abruptly, the stream of movement thinned, which means there weren't so many anymore. There were only a few people, and these moved more rapidly, as if the film had been sped up. One white-faced man in a dark suit looked directly at the children and said, "Oh dear, I shall be late," and flickered into the building. He's like the White Rabbit, Meg giggled nervously. I'm scared, Charles said. I can't reach them at all. I'm completely shut out. We have to find Father, Meg started again. Meg, Charles Wallace's eyes were wide and frightened. I'm not sure I'll even know Father. It's been so long and I was only a baby. Meg's reassurance came quickly. You'll know him. Of course you'll know him. The way you'd know me even without looking, because I'm always there for you. You can always reach it. Yes. Charles punched one small fist into an open palm with a gesture of great decision. Let's go into Central Intelligence. Calvin reached out and caught both Charles and Meg by the arm. You remember when we met, you asked me why I was here, and I told you it was because I had a compulsion, a feeling. I just had to come to that particular place at that particular moment. Yeah, sure. I've got another feeling, not the same kind, a different one, a feeling that if we go into that building, we're going into terrible danger. Oh. Let's leave it there. So, chapter 7 is called The Man with Red Eyes. It is just starting to get really interesting. It was a little bit complicated to begin with all the different planets and different people and things, but now they're on this planet. They're trying to find the father. It's going to get really, really good. So, next week I'll try and do 2. I'll try and do one at the beginning of the week, and then one towards the end of the week so we can get another chapter done next week. So, yeah, I hope you're all doing really, really well. Let us know your news. Stay happy, stay safe. And hopefully we'll see each other again real soon. Bye-bye.